Or a P or a Q or an A or a B? What do we call them, though? What are they called? Variables. I heard somebody say it. It's a variable. So again, usually X, but doesn't have to be X. Why? Why did mathematicians take numbers and put letters involved? Well, math is all about the unknown. It's about finding something out, and when we don't know something, we put a letter down because we don't know what it is yet. What does the word variable mean in English? If something is variable, what does that mean? It means it's changing. It means it's not the same thing all the time, and that's why we call this a variable, because we don't know what A is. And A might be 5 in this question, but it might be -2 in the next question. It might be 7. Do you know why we use X more often than anything else? So why an X? Why is it our favorite? Why is it the most popular? Anybody know? Why X? You guys are not good at guessing things. Just guess.
It's the last letter.
Except that's Z, but it's close to the end. It's close to the end. It's actually, if you look at the evolution of language and how language and math passed through civilization. Civilization started in the Middle East, passed through Africa, went up into Europe, came to Europe to us. And when it came through the Middle East, it came as an Arabic language. So it wasn't in English was the first math, it was in Arabic. And they kept using the word for unknown, which was Shibran. And when that went into Africa, it got translated into their language. But more importantly, it went up to Europe through Spain. That's the first point of entry through Europe. And there was no Arabic in Spain, so they had to start translating into their language. And what happened is they came down to the letter sh, which we do not have in English, but a lot of languages have a sh and a ch sound. We don't. We just put 2 letters together. Well, Spanish doesn't either, and they didn't have a sh sound, which was the letter in Arabic. So they picked chi, which was their closest, and it was spelled xi. And so they abbreviated that to X. So it actually is because there's no sh in Spanish. That's why we use X. It has nothing to do with pirates or X marks the spot, or it all has to do with language and the fact that we don't have a sh sound. What's a number in front of a variable? I'll give you the example first. If I were to put 3x, or I were to put -2a, or I were to put 99m, what do I want to know is what is it called when I stick it in front of a variable? So the 3 or the -2 or the 99. Anyone remember this one from last year? What are you looking for, Rory? They're up on the desk there because I just gave them out today. Anybody know what it's called? It is called, who said it? Who said it? High five, coefficient, longest word ever.
Oh yeah, it is right there.
Coefficient. Coefficient. So throughout this unit, I'm going to be talking about coefficients over and over and variables. And if you don't know what the words mean, this is going to be a long unit. That's why we're just looking at the vocabulary first. Sometimes we'll just have a variable like y, for example, and we won't have anything in front of it. Well, there is a coefficient there. We just don't need to write it out. What do we assume it is? It can't be 0, because anything times 0 is 0. What's the only number that when you multiply by it, it doesn't change the number? So I like to write it with a dotted line. I call it the imaginary 1. So if there is no coefficient, we assume it's 1. And the reason mathematically we don't write it is because 1 times y is y. 1 times x is x. It doesn't change. So it's there, but we don't really write it. This one I know you know for sure. It's a superscript number. Superscript means higher and smaller, indicating repeated multiplications. So an example, if I put 7x squared, what I want is a vocabulary word for the squared, because we already know what the x is called. X is called the variable. We know what the 7 is called. It's called a coefficient. -5m to the 4th. -5 is my coefficient. M is my variable. What's this little guy right up there? He is an exponent. Sometimes you might not have an exponent. So for example, I could have 3x, like the example above. Again, there is an exponent. We just don't see it. But what do we assume it is? It's a 1. So there is a little imaginary 1 that we don't see if there is no exponent. I'm going to spend this whole unit talking about variables, coefficients, exponents over and over and over. If you don't know what the words mean, this is going to be a really hard unit. That's why we're practicing the words first. The multiplication of variables and coefficients is called a term. So if I gave 7x squared just like above, this whole thing together is a term. It's made up of variables, coefficients, and exponents, but it's a term. I could have something crazy like negative 3a squared bc d to the 4th. That's still called a term because I'm multiplying everything in there. I could have something simple like 5. That's still called a term. So basically, I can smush as much stuff as I want together as long as it's all multiplying. It's called a term.
Only if it's multiplying?
Mm-hmm. Why is that important? Well, we're going to look at expressions with 1 term and 2 term and 3 terms and a whole bunch of terms. So we need to know what a term is. I'm actually going to jump down to definition number 4, which is an expression with many terms. An expression with many terms is called a polynomial, which is the name of this unit. In the bucket. And so you may have heard this word. Well, I said it today for sure, and you were like, what? What's this polynomial stuff? It's not like garden gnomes. It has nothing to do with that. What does poly mean? So you may have heard polyamorous. Anybody watch the show? Oh, what is it called? I just totally lost it. The family with the 3 wives and like the 17 children. What is that called? Sister wives. That's a polyamorous family. So what do you think poly means? Many. It means you have a bunch of wives. So this means many. Gnome is the Latin root for number. Eo is just meaning a noun. So it's just something with many numbers. So that's what this unit is about. It's just different terms. So let's go back now. What do you think an expression with 1 term is? Well, it's not going to have poly in front because poly means many. What's the prefix that means 1? So if you have 1 lens, what do we call that? If your glasses is only 1/2, what do we call that? What's the board game that you play when you want to own every company on the board? You want to have 1 owner. Monopoly. What do we call eyeglasses with just a half? A monocle. So what do you think an expression with 1 term is? It's a monomial. Mono means 1. That's where it comes from. It's from Latin. Expression with 2 terms. What do we call a vehicle with 2 wheels? A bicycle. So what do you think an expression with 2 terms is? A binomial. Bi is the Latin suffix or prefix, sorry, for 2. Three. What do you think we call an expression with 3 terms? Trinomial. Like a tricycle or a triangle. Brody's sighing because I asked for his phone because he was just on his phone. And when can you use your phones? And am I using my phone right now? No, because you're more important to me. You're all more important to me than my phone. So an example of a monomial means it has 1 term, so 7x. Even though that's 2 pieces, it's still 1 term because we're multiplying. 2ab is still 1 term, even though it's got 3 pieces because it's all multiplication. Let's look at an example of a binomial. A binomial would be 7x plus 2ab. Why is that a binomial? So it's really the additions and subtractions that separate terms. 7a is one term, 2ab is a second term. Two terms make it a binomial. Another example of a binomial could be x plus y. What's the first term? X. What's the second term? Y. That's why it's called a binomial. AB minus 4a squared. What's the first term? AB. What's the second term? Negative 4a squared. So it's plus or negatives that mix or separate terms. A trinomial just means it has three things. We could have an x squared plus a y minus 7. Three terms because x squared is a term, y is a term, negative 7 is a term. We could have 7 plus a minus 14. B, because I want to put a b on it. That's a trinomial because 7 is a term, a is a term, minus 14b is a term. It's plus and minus that separate term. After 3, we don't have a specific name. There's no name for something with 4, 5, 6. We just call them polynomials after 3. So 1 has a specific name, monomial. 2 has a specific name, binomial. 3 has a specific name, trinomial. After that, they're just polynomials. Questions so far? What do we call a number without a variable? Well, we used to just call them numbers, but now we're doing big boy math. 2 or 5 or negative 17 or negative 29,542. We can't call them coefficients because coefficients have to be attached to a variable. So coefficients are attached to a variable. What is it without a variable? They're called constants. Variable means changing. What does a constant mean? Not changing. I want to highlight constant. I guess I'm boxing it, not highlighting it. And I want to go back and highlight or box coefficient, because those are the two people always mix up, because they both start with C and they're both long words. What does co mean? If you are cohabitating with someone. If you are in a company, what are you doing? You're sharing. So this is joined. It's co because it's got a variable. It's attached to the variable. It's like sharing the space with a variable. The constant is not. It's constant. It's by itself. It's not changing. Not changing means no variable. Again, those are the two people mixed up the most often, and I'm going to talk about coefficients, and I'm going to talk about constants, so you should know which is which. Coefficient has a variable. Constant, no variable. The highest or largest exponent in a polynomial is called the degree. If I gave you the binomial x squared plus y, we know there's a squared on the x. We know there's an imaginary 1 on the y. Which one is bigger? The 2 is bigger. So that's called the degree of 2. It's called a second degree polynomial. If I gave you a to the 4th minus 7a squared, which is bigger, 4 or 2? So this is called a 4th degree polynomial. If I gave you 7x plus x cubed, 7x plus x cubed, what's the biggest exponent? So that's called a 3rd degree polynomial. So it's just how we name the polynomials is by their largest exponent. We have to classify them somehow. That's how we do it. Terms that have the exact same exponent and variable. The coefficients may be different. These are called like terms. We group terms into what's called like terms or non-like terms. They're either like or they're not like. If they're like, it means they have to have the same variable, same exponent. So an example of two like terms could be 7x and 8x. Those are called like terms because they both have a variable of x. They both have an exponent of 1. It could be 8a squared and minus 14a squared. Those are called like terms because they both have a's, they both have squareds. Another example could be 6ab and minus ab. They both have the same variable. They both have the same exponent. So it's kind of like in your family where everyone has the same last name generally. These guys have the same last name, but the first part can be different. Does everyone in your family have the same first name? That would be really weird. Imagine if they did. So the front can be different. The back has to be the same. It's like the first name and last name of a polynomial. 2 more words to go. A group of terms with no equal sign. It is an expression. High five. An expression. I'm going to come back to the example. I just want to compare it to the last word, and it's an expression that equals another expression. Equation. So an expression is really just a polynomial. So an example could be 7a plus 8b plus 5. That could be a trinomial. It could also be an expression. The difference is really equation, and an equation would be 7a plus 8b equals 5. What's the only difference between an expression and an equation? Is the equal sign. That's the only thing that's different. Whew, these are all the vocabulary words you need to know. Have you heard of a few of them, some of them, or most of them before? Some of them. Most people, some of them. Let's just practice using them. First thing we're going to do is state the best vocabulary word. Then we'll talk about degree and number of terms and that kind of thing. Best just means there could be more than one, and we want the best one to describe. Your first quiz for this unit is going to have a question exactly like this, number 1. Exactly like this. It's going to point to something or identify something, and you just have to name it. What is this arrow pointing to? Because we know we have the -4, we got the x, and we got that little 3. What do you think it's pointing to? It's the -4 it's pointing to. So what do we call a number that's in front of a variable? Coefficient. Here it's giving me 2 different terms. We could say they're both monomials, but that's not the best word. What are they trying to get you to understand about these? We'll take a look at their last name. What do you see at the back? They both have an x, they both have a y squared. The front is different, and that's like the first name. So which vocabulary word talked about 2 terms being the same or similar? Like terms is what they're trying to get you to say. Yes, they're both expressions. Yes, they're both monomials, but really when they're putting 2 like that, they're trying to get you to say that the best word is like terms. -4x plus 6 minus 9y plus 23. What's the key symbol in there that they're trying to get you to notice? The equal sign. The minute it has an equal sign, the best vocabulary word is equation. What do you think the arrow is pointing to in this one? Because I got the 6, I got the x, I got the y, I got the 4. What do you think it's pointing to? The 4. What's the word for the little tiny superscript number up in the top? Exponent. Number 5, what's it pointing at? Just the 9. Yes, it's a number. Yes, it's a whole number, not what we're looking for. What was the vocabulary word that was a number all by itself, no variable attached? Constant. No variable means it's constant. Number 6, no arrow. There's no comma separating them. So this is just asking you to count the number of terms. The first term is 6x. The second term is -7y. What's an expression when we have only 2 terms? Binomial. Number 7, what's it pointing to? The c. So yes, this is an expression. Yes, it's a trinomial, but not what they want. They want, what's that c called? Variable. Number 8, no arrow. So what did we do up in number 6 when there was no arrow? count. So we have an x squared is the first term. Then we have 3x, which is the second term. Then we have negative 5. How many terms? Trinomial. Yes, this is an expression. Yes, it's a polynomial, but the best word is trinomial. Oh my God, number 9. What is that? What is that? This is where people are like, what did you do to math? What is that? Yes, it's a polynomial, but let's count the number of terms. It's a one-term expression. Even though there's all this stuff in here, is there any plus or minuses in between any of them? So I would accept monomial. And there's another word that I think is equally as good to describe it. Yes, I would go more term. Crazy term, yes. Number 10, what is this? Again, a whole bunch of crap stuck in there. But what you have to notice, the difference between 9 and 10 is there plus signs in the middle or minuses in the middle. So we know this isn't a monomial. So I will take 2 vocabulary words for this. What's the first one that I like? Polynomial is a good one. How do I know it's a polynomial and not a trinomial? Yeah, more than 3. Another one that I think is equally as good? Expression. No equal sign means it's an expression. I would take either one of those for that one. There's going to be a homework question exactly like this. There's going to be a quiz question exactly like this just to practice the vocabulary. Number 2, we got to do a bunch of stuff. We have to identify the number of terms. We're going to state its degree, and we're going to give it some kind of vocabulary word, or we're going to name it. There's going to be a quiz question exactly like this on our first quiz. Put it away, please. Number of terms. What's the first term?
4x.
So I like to circle them sometimes because it's a little more visual what's grouped together. All of that is one term because it's all stuck together with multiplying. Is there another term? 3. 3 is the second term because it's separated by that plus sign. How many circles or how many terms? 2. Let's do all the number of terms first just to practice. In part B, what's the first term? The second term? Third term? How many circles? The last one, how many terms? 1. Just the little 4 all by itself. The degree. Now this gets a little bit tricky because we don't see exponents, but we know they're there. What's on the x? So I'm going to write it in there. And what's on the y? A 1. So for that one little term, what's the total of the exponents if I were to add them up? This is a total of an exponent of 2. Because there's a 1 on the x and 1 on the y, so that term has a total of 2. When I don't have a variable, what's the exponent? It's a 0. So this is said to be a degree of 0. So the first term has a degree of 2. The second term has a degree of 0. We're just looking for the higher number. Which one's bigger, 2 or 0? So this is called a second degree polynomial. A second degree polynomial. Okay, degree of the first term, well, it's a 2 because that's all we see for the exponent. The second term, I've got a 1 on the x and a 1 on the y. When I add those together, 2. The last term, I just have the 1 on the y. And all I care about is what's the highest number. I don't care that there's 2 2's. All I care is it's the highest, so this is also a second degree polynomial. The 4. Yeah, we just talked over here. What's the degree when there is no variable? It's called a 0 degree polynomial. Questions on how to degree something? Okay, let's name it. 2 terms called a binomial. 3 terms? One term? Yes, it's a constant, but let's name it as a polynomial. It's a monomial. Here's where we get creative in math. We're like, give two expressions. So we're just going to give you some criteria. You can make up anything you want. Has to have two terms, has to have two variables, one has to be a constant, and has to have a degree of 3. So I'm going to do the first one with you, and then you're going to give me the other one. Two terms, I like to put two blanks because it reminds myself now I need to fill in those two blanks. Has to have two variables, but one of them has to be a constant. So let's do the constant first. Give me a constant number. 62. Why did I put it in the second? I don't know. I could have put it in the first. Now, if I have to have two variables, and this has to be a constant, what do I know about this term? It has to have two letters. Give me any two letters that you like. I put Z and B. It has to have a degree of 3. So that means these have to have a total of exponents that give me 3. 2 and 1. I could also put 2 and, or 1 and 2. Could I put 3 and 0? No, because we know the constant has 0. So I'm going to put 2 and 1. That's only one possibility. Do I even need to write that 1? So I can just write this as Z squared B plus 62. There are a bajillion possible answers for this question as long as it has the criteria. Write down a second polynomial that has the exact same criteria. Write down a second polynomial that has the exact same criteria. Don't say anything